All right, welcome back to Russell Street Replay. I'm jazzed for this podcast. I'm super excited. The Ravens just won in Week 14 in Pittsburgh, and we're here to recap it. I'm Nikhil Mehta, and with me, as always, Ronald Toothe, and our good friend Mike Natelli is back on the pod. Guys, that was a huge win in Pittsburgh. Like, I don't know. It weirdly felt like a must-win game because we might be without Jackson for a little bit longer. And so I guess that's kind of my big question to start the week is, was this really the biggest win of the Ravens season so far, or did it just feel like it because it was in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think it definitely was. We mentioned briefly a little bit last week that really in this stretch without Lamar, this whole thing is more about survival as opposed to like how do the wins look and, how is like the offense humming along, because we knew that it wasn't going to be. I mean, even before Lamar went out, it wasn't really looking all that great. And not having him either, it's just you couldn't really expect this offense to go out there yesterday and put up 30 points, especially against the Steelers of all teams. But in terms of just the how big the win is, it absolutely is. I think this upcoming week, which, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, is just as big. I think this one is probably the one that ensures us getting into the playoffs if we can pull it out on the road. But up to this point, absolutely, probably the biggest win of the year, I would say.
Yeah, you think about last year, and when Lamar got hurt, it was around the same time. And so here it goes again. Everyone thinks, all right, it's going to be the same situation here. Here we go. What happened there? We didn't win a single game after that, even though we were so close to the playoff position right there. This year, turned the script a little bit. And so just even getting that one, I think there's something mentally about seeing that you can do that without him after last year rattling off 6 where it's just about every single game. I think they lost all of them by combined like 9 points or something crazy. Just the mental psyche of knowing you can go out there and win it without him, and without Tyler Huntley, by the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. There's just something about that. And then you look at the standings that Chargers are gaining, the Jets are gaining, the Patriots play a pretty beatable Cardinals team here in about an hour and a half. Well, there's some cushion. This is hardly, a finished deal yet. So there's still some work to do, and knocking off at least one division win here against Pittsburgh was monumental.
Yeah, and I think getting that divisional, getting all the divisional tiebreakers we can, who knows if the Browns end up being in a wild card position at the end of all this, but at the end of the day, right, without Lamar, it becomes less let's win the division and more let's get to the playoffs. But if you're able to just keep pace with the Bengals, the fact they have a hard schedule has been documented and helps us. If you're able to keep pace with the Bengals during this and come out with the division, even if it's using the tiebreakers, you still get a home playoff game. And that's huge. I think that's huge for this team to be able to have a home playoff game, knowing that you're going to have to go into Buffalo or go into KC most likely to get to the Super Bowl or even to get to the AFC Championship. And so getting through that first game with a home playoff game, I think, is key. And that's why this is a Steelers win. So much was talked about all the players who hadn't beat the Steelers as Ravens. And there's you're not officially a Raven until you beat the Steelers. That obviously was on Calais Campbell's mind all game. Queen played his best game, one of the best games of the year so far, one of the best games of his career. And so, I think it's big because basically this defense is putting everyone on notice. We're a championship caliber defense, and we don't have Lamar Jackson. We didn't have Lamar Jackson on the field. Now, when we do have Lamar Jackson on the field and we are a championship caliber defense, it's going to be that kind of, hopefully I'm hoping this game kicked Roman in the butt a little bit and kind of helped him get back to his bully ball roots a little bit, because he was dialing up like just the sequences of run plays. And I can't wait to go back and look at the film of the way that he kind of sets up the Steelers defense with different jabs and punches to different sides before the knockout blow. It's something that some of our colleagues at Rusty Report, Deb Bunkschwag and James Ogden, have talked about a lot, the way he kind of sets up his runs. And I felt like he didn't do that so well so far this year. And he really did a good job doing that this game. And that is why I think it's such a big boost. It's not just the defense. It's also reminding, like, look, this offense and this offensive line is so good. We can just run the ball and beat most teams in this league. And knowing that and knowing that he can trust that for the next few games without Lamar is huge. I also just felt like from an emotional standpoint, it was like I wasn't concerned about them blowing the game, even though the circumstances they were facing. It was weird. You get that feeling of, they're starting to blow a lead again. And then they they just stood firm. It didn't feel like there was any one play that really was like saving the game for them in the fourth quarter. It just felt like they just held on. And, I think we'll talk a little bit about what happened with the defense later and some of the things that you might want to be worried about. But overall, it just felt like they put in a complete performance with what they had. Like with what they were dealt with the hand they were dealt with Huntley, everything, they put in the best possible performance they could have.
Yeah. I mean, when you're down to your third string quarterback, that's really all you can ask for, right? I was probably a little more concerned than most people about that last drive defensively. Just because when you consider the fact of like, oh, they allowed Denver to go 50 yards last week and kick a potential game winning field goal. The week before that, it's well documented what happened in Jacksonville. This kind of thing happening one week, it's all right. It happens, but this is 3 weeks in a row now. So that is a bit of a trend. And going back to the beginning of the season, obviously we all remember all those blown leads late as well. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. I'm not going to give them too much flack about it this week overall, just because, I mean, they had 3 interceptions. They had the blocked field goal. Defensively, it was a masterclass for 55 of those 60 minutes. So I won't harp on it too much, but it's something to keep an eye on, especially as we kind of get into the Cincinnatis of the world later in the season.
Yeah, definitely a bend don't break model with all those interceptions in the red zone, and which is on the one hand is incredible. You love seeing both your linebackers making plays like that. You love seeing Marcus Williams coming up with that interception in the end zone. On the flip side of that, the odds that you're going to get 3 interceptions every single week, the odds that Mitch Trubisky is going to be the quarterback on the other side every single week are not that high. And so on the one hand, walk away really happy that your guys are making plays. And on the other, you don't want to be putting yourself in that situation every single week because you're going to be facing better quarterbacks down the stretch. Maybe not so much in Atlanta and then Pittsburgh again, but after that with Burrow and then potentially in the playoffs, that's just not something you're going to be able to get away with every single week. And so definitely some things to clean up. The final score is a little misleading as far as how the defense played because, again, like they make the interception, but you don't want to be getting down there several times over. George Pickens was picking them apart. That was a really bad pun, and it wasn't on purpose. So definitely some things to clean up on both sides of the ball. You don't love Greg Roman running his backup quarterback as heavily as he did. Tyler Huntley was begging to get injured throughout the entire game, and sure enough, he did. But at the same time, he was, fighting for another win. And so it was messy. It was complicated, but got the job done. And really in Pittsburgh week, that's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think for Raven of the game, I feel like this was one of those games where like so many guys did really well. It felt like it was like a lot of all around good performances, a lot of players, some of them putting in their best games of the season or even their career so far. So I figured we could just go around and each pick one player, different player, obviously, as our Raven of the game. And Ron, I'm going to let you go first because I think there's a pretty obvious candidate you're going to want to speak in favor of.
Absolutely. From the Ohio State University, finally, J.K. Dobbins was back. He was healthy. Admittedly, I think we can all agree that he didn't really look like he was running at 100%. I think that was probably most notable on the 44-yard run really early in the game. But even still, I mean, at 70%, he was by far the best running back on the field yesterday. 15 carries, 120 yards in the touchdown. In everything, I'm trying to think of how to put it. Like, if you didn't just, like, if he looked great in every aspect except the fact that his running style didn't look quite as smooth as we're used to. Like, every other metric or way that you want to put it, his explosiveness, his cutting, like, it was all tremendous. He probably, with the exception of, I believe it was the Jacksonville game or the Cincinnati game in 2021, whichever one where he had like 189 yards and just went sick. Besides from that, I think this was his best game as a pro when you take into account the fact that this is his first game back from missing the entire season pretty much. He had a couple games in there where he played, but for the most part, I mean, to just come in cold and do that, I mean, it was awesome to see. And he's going to be leaned on really heavily here down the stretch. So, I mean, nothing but promising in that regard.
Explosive run plays. Explosive run plays is where it's going to be at for this offense to get chunks of yard moving down the field. And, Edwards is your short yardage guy. He can pull off the explosive runs, but usually it's a lot of rumbling, breaking through a bunch of guys, and that's just hard to replicate consistently. Whereas Dobbins, I mean, again, him looking like, the way he was running, like you said, he's not at full speed. He's not running at his maximum speed, but something that multiple people have commented on and like watching this game is just his footwork in between the tackles to get through, get through clean, right? His ability to get through holes clean without slowing down is really what allows him to break off these bigger runs. And so I agree. I think he's going to be huge down the stretch.
And also one other thing that I really loved on the touchdown, like I feel like it's almost like the vintage J.K. Dobbins move. He makes himself like so small to where it's like he's crawling sometimes. It's like really weird. If you go back and watch that play, I know it probably sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about, but like the way he it's almost like he's bear crawling towards the end zone. The way that he's able to condense himself, especially when he gets in between the tackles, is another thing. It's like it's one of those things where it's more of a mental thing as opposed to something that would be, potentially held back because he's just coming back from the injury. It's stuff like that really makes Dobbins great.
Yeah, the players talked about how much this game meant to him, coming back after the injury, being able to play. And, he's got like this, he's got 1 foot off the ground and then 3 feet off the ground. There's blockages in his way. There's guys flying around him and he just kind of dives through these holes. And I don't know how he even sees them, much less gets through them. Mike, you got a Raven of the game for us?
How about you go first? Cause I got 2 and I don't want to take yours.
All right, I'm gonna go with the one that I really was just very impressed by this game is Tyler Linderbaum. Linderbaum had maybe he had some really good games as a pro. Maybe other than the Tampa Bay game, this was his best game. He just executed every single block and like every single type of block imaginable. He was pulling really well, but the thing that was most impressive to me was the Steelers tried to go after him with Cam Hayward all game, and he just blocked the heck out of Cam Hayward. And that's not something people are able to do. It's not something a rookie lineman who's like barely 300 pounds, I don't even know if he breaks 300 on a scale, should be able to do. And it's just, again, him knowing all of the technical details of blocking so well, where to get leverage, where to get your feet to open up a hole. Like, it was just so brilliant. And again, this goes back to Roman knowing what he has in Linderbaum and calling plays that really like went right at Hayward in a way, but in such a way that Linderbaum is able to use his speed and agility to get forward and seal off the block before Hayward can even get there. It was just a center masterclass. And man, I love watching this O-line. This O-line is just so much fun to watch, and adding Linderbaum and having Stanley in it makes it so much more than kind of the smash mouth power gap style that they like. That's still their dominant style of offense, but the way they block is so technically proficient. And Tyler Linderbaum is really one of the best examples of that we can see right now. I was just so impressed with him in this game. It never felt like he was letting too much pressure through the middle, and everything that was asked of him, he executed almost flawlessly. So I was just really impressed with him, especially with Zeitler out next to him. Zeitler being next to him was a big like rookie with a solid vet right next to him kind of combo all year, and he really had to take control in the center of the line, and I think he did.
Yeah, I think that that wrestling background really helped him a lot on Sunday. It really helps him in terms of, being able to get leverage in that hand position, that kind of stuff, even when you're against guys that might be a little bigger than you. I think that was another big benefit to him. I don't even know if he wrestled in college as well, but I know he was quite the stud in high school.
Yeah, him and Tristan Wirth.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
it's great. I love mentioning every chance I can, because I think it just tells you like Wirth is huge, Wirth is massive. And it just tells you how good Linderbaum is and how smart he is. Like it really takes an understanding, not like a expert PhD level, but it does take some understanding of physics and physiology and how to get and use leverage like this. And it's clear that he does his homework on that respect, or on that aspect of things too. So, Mike, you got a player of the game?
Yeah, let's go. I mean, it seems maybe obvious or low hanging fruit, but how about Roquan Smith? Not just with that interception, but also with the sack. You're not a Ravens linebacker until you've gotten a sack in a Steelers game. And man, it was just fun watching him get to the quarterback like that. So
first drive too set the tone.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, to say nothing of the fact that, when you think about Patrick Queen also getting a pick, there's just something about having him in his natural position that having Roquan out there does. Letting Patrick Queen over at Mike linebacker just makes such a difference. I mean, we look at the final score, it was a two-point game, but really there was two key possessions there that made a world of difference when they forced those turnovers with both linebackers getting those picks. The first one was Roquan Smith, and it made just such a difference. There's even a little bit of a return that set up good field position. And then one more for you. How about Calais Campbell as an honorary fourth getting that block? Chris Horton calling that audible. They haven't even tried it all season in practice, and then all of a sudden he calls it in. Calais moves to the A gap, steps up, throws his hand up, blocks a 3-point field goal in a 2-point game. And that wins you the game right there. So we'll give it to both Calais Campbell and also maybe Chris Horton on the coaching side for making that switch.
I love that. I think it's the funniest middle finger the Ravens F you to the rest of the NFL who can't get their crap together on special teams in the first place. And the Ravens just looking through literally on a controller, looking through the Madden playbook for which field goal block play do I want to dial up right now? And there's no other team that's able to do that. There's no other guy in the history of the NFL that's able to do that the way Campbell is. I mean, whether or not it's him making the block or him opening the space for the block, he's just literally a Hall of Fame kick blocker, one of those ultra niche things that he is just so good at. And I'm always stunned that they're able to be we're going to block, we're going to block this kick. We have decided to block this kick on this play, and they do it. And it just blows my mind.
And then he runs to the sidelines after and starts waving the towel to taunt the Steelers. That was the most.
That was the most
Raven move of all time, and it was beautiful.
Between the raising the roof and the wiggling his hips and waving the towel, head and shoulders my favorite Calais Campbell game since he's been a Raven by far.
Not close.
I think Calais Campbell's one of my favorite football players because I grew up, I grew up on him. I grew up on him in Arizona. He was on that He was on the Jacksonville team that almost stunned Brady, and that was super fun. It just felt like he's been around for so many of the interesting football moments that I've followed. And having him at Baltimore, when he arrived, I was it's kind of an interesting pickup. He's really a lot older than what they normally go for in picking up a veteran. And he was oh, no, I don't age. That's not, it doesn't work on me. So he's been so impressive. So and speaking of which, I mean, I think that's probably the clear nominee for Mile High Miracle Play of the Week. I mean, you kind of had the feeling, I don't know about you guys, but I had the feeling, I was yeah, I mean, the line for this game is Ravens +2. There's your difference. I mean, there's the difference between the Ravens winning and losing on the scoreboard, literally, but also just in terms of you could feel it in the moment of that was points are at such a premium, and the Steelers were able to get down the field again in a scoring position, and you stick that big meaty paw up and get a big clump of football, and it's just. I don't know. I was just blown away. I was in the stands and I was did they really just do that? So that's probably my Mile High Miracle Play of the game. But you guys mentioned the interceptions, both Queen and Roquan. What else do we want to shout out here?
You want to go first, Michael?
Let's see. As far as a play of the week, I mean, I definitely think that I already said it, but I thought that Roquan Smith interception was just crucial because I mean, you've seen what happens if the Ravens are trailing. I mean, when you think about who they had out there, it was Tyler Huntley, then Anthony Brown. You have Lamar Jackson's been the one who's led, substantial comebacks for us in the past. And when he's not out there, you already have been for several weeks missing Bateman out there. The odds of coming back, if you start allowing the all those scores in the red zone between Roquan Smith's pick, Patrick Queen's interception, you just don't feel good about that game after that. I mean, both times I feel when they moved down to the red zone, you just kind of felt oh boy, this isn't going to go very well. We're giving stuff up to Mitch Trubisky of all people. And man, they just put a clamp on that, I think. So to me, that was the one that really just with Patrick Queen's as well. I guess it's kind of a combo pick, which might be cheating a little bit, but I guess we'll double up on the linebacker interceptions in the red zone because that was just the difference maker in this game.
Yeah, I mean, one was a leaping grab by Mr. Well, I guess we can't talk about his hands anymore. He said the word is out on the street. that, making a leaping grab after struggling with some earlier this year. And Roquan, man, he was like determined to house that thing. Like he just the way he was running was like, I gotta get to the end. Like I gotta get as far as I possibly can. And again, the defense knowing it was on them this week and coming up so big, I think is just a huge part of the way this team is actually finally playing some complementary football, something I feel like they struggled to do earlier in the year. Ron, your play of the week.
My Mile High Miracle play of the week was a first that we've probably ever seen in the NFL. Mutual possession on a fumble recovery.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
It definitely turned things in terms of, Pittsburgh recovers that fumble. Things aren't really, you're just not really feeling great. I forget if they ended up getting points on that drive. Did they end up kicking the 3 on that drive?
Let me go take a look and see.
I forget off the top of my head, but regardless, and it was Linderbaum who recovered that, right? Or who had so again, he's in there mixing it up with TJ Watt. Like you love to see that toughness from Linderbaum and a mutual fumble. I didn't even know that was a thing before Sunday, but apparently it is. I don't know. Maybe they just felt bad and wanted to make TJ Watt feel like he also had possession of it or something. I was always under the way of thinking that it was tie goes to the runner kind of rule thing. So, but either way, big play in terms of the momentum. And you love to see the grit from Linderbaum mixing it up in there with the All-Pro.
Yeah, no few offensive highlights to speak of. I mean, the main one is the big Dobbins run that we talked about. That was just perfectly blocked, and he's got that explosiveness and just that. I mean, he still had the 6th highest speed reached by a Ravens ball carrier this year, I think. So, I mean, that was electric to see. I mean, just seeing him back, even though he got caught, I still think Minkah, if he tries to take it all the way in straight, I think Minkah probably spears him out of bounds at the 1, which is probably less of a good thing than him controlling the way he went down. So I don't have any qualms about that. That was incredible. The back to practice award, this is kind of a weird one. I know, Ron, last week we talked about the run blocking, and the O-line really answered the call. They really answered the bell. I mean, without Kevin Zeitler, the plan to bring in Cologne for some downs and drives and Cleveland for other drives it worked. It was great. They both played well when they were in, I felt like, and Ben Powers was just bullying people off the ball. Morgan Moses, I feel like, has really, really tuned up his pull game. He's really dominating on those blocks now in a way he wasn't before. And of course, having Ronnie Stanley back opens up so much more for this offense. But what do you? It was kind of a game where it was like I said, they did the best they possibly could. I guess now's probably the best time to talk about the defense and giving up 276 pass yards to Mitch Trubisky. We've been happy about the interceptions plenty. We've praised that enough that I think we can push back a little bit against what was just not a great game in coverage for really anyone not named Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith, or Marcus Williams. It just felt like Peters, Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton was not dominating out of the slot like he has been in previous games. And, that's, to me, it was just a lot of execution stuff. It was very little play call scheme related stuff. It was just Steelers were picking the right guys to pick on at the right moments in the right ways too.
Yeah, it was a very uncharacteristic game from Marlon compared to what we've seen. Obviously, there was the big play for Pickens. There was the PI on Deontay Johnson, I believe it was. Not his best game, but it's another one. I'm not really going to lace into him too hard. The guy's been an all-pro all year. No one's going to play great every single game. So while it definitely has to be mentioned, it wasn't his best performance. And as we saw on Twitter, he was the first one to own up to it. So not really anything substantial there that I'm too worried about. Peters got his weekly 15-yard penalty again that we're so used to, even though in his defense, he was pushed first, and the referee, if you go watch the replay, was legitimately right in front of it. I have no clue how he missed it. Even if you want to throw the 15 on Peters too, you got to throw the 15 on the guy who pushed him first. Mm-hmm. They're pretty much in terms of things you looked at from this game, and it was that wasn't very good. It would be all secondary related. Even Hamilton didn't really have his best game. He gave up the touchdown to Freiermuth, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. So just not really. Or was it the touchdown? It was the touchdown, right? To Freiermuth? Or was it just? Yeah. So yeah, not really his best game either, but like overall they were very good. Situationally, they weren't and haven't really been good in terms of late in the game. The situational aspect of getting both of those interceptions in the red zone and taking points off the board was key. It's so weird and so uncanny how they've played so well for 3 3/4 of a game, for this last month. And then it's just like, I don't know if it's a schematic thing. I don't know if it's just guys getting tired late in the game. We've got a lot of older guys out there, especially in the pass rush department. I don't really know what it is, but it's something they're going to really have to address here.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to note, kind of I guess we could talk about the home cooking by the referees a little bit later, but like Pickens is really, really good at that subtle OPI that's just not going to get called. Like, Marlowe likes to be physical and hands-on, and so if Pickens kind of snatches his hands away at the last second, that's not going to get called because Marlowe's being physical, and so part of it's trying to figure out a counterpunch to that. I was a little just confused as how Marlowe was losing some of these one-on-ones. He's usually just good at the catch point and was just not on his game. So Marlowe I'm not worried about, but I agree, Peters just doesn't look as sharp. It looks like he's definitely not as comfortable in some of the zones that he's being put into, and I think that's a schematic thing. And then Kyle Hamilton is still a rookie and still kind of going up and down. And yeah, I mean, I think there's no one thing specifically to be worried about. It's just, really got to firm up in those 2 minutes. I mean, in the playoffs, that's going to be when, the heat is on and, it looks like you have an entire Air Force flying at you with Mahomes or, Josh Allen or whatever. And those are going to be the moments, right? Especially with the kind of realization that it's going to be the defense that gets us there, probably more likely than the offense is. So, Mike, was there anything that stood out to you in this game that you'd want the Ravens to go train up on the practice field this week?
Yeah, I guess first, real quick, just touching on that, I think one thing maybe to touch on, Ron, you're talking about the defense and the late scores. One thing to point out is just that it's a lot different when you're not scoring points and the team gives up one score in the fourth quarter, because it's like with Jacob deGrom and the Mets not getting any run support. It just stands out a lot more. I mean, by contrast, they gave up 18 to Jacksonville a few weeks ago, which is much more on the defense. Whereas when at some point you're going to bend or break, when you're doing the bend, don't break model, you're going to break. So I think that it was a little more encouraging to me. I felt a little less icky about it coming out of this week than I did against Jacksonville or even Buffalo, where they only gave up 3 points in the fourth quarter. Granted, it was a pretty crucial 3 points, but nonetheless, it was 3 points, not 10. It wasn't 18. It wasn't anything like we saw in Miami. They gave up points, and that's going to happen against a team like Buffalo. So a little more encouraging to see that, especially because they didn't then go allow another score to let them take the lead. Beyond that, though, it was the third down offense to me was really the part that was the most frustrating. 4 for 13. I don't care who's in the quarterback, especially when you're running the ball as well as you are. It felt like there was a lot of the time on second down, they were just not putting themselves in position to set themselves up that well. On the one hand, I get that you don't want to, just keep doing the same thing and get predictable. But when you're running the ball at 8 yards a carry, I think you can afford to be a little more predictable until they tell you to stop.
For sure.
And then once, if Dobbins and Edwards are out there getting 1 or 2 yards a carry pretty consistently, then mix it up and try and open things up a little bit more. But hat tip to Anthony Brown for looking great on that final drive, being able to, really pass the ball effectively, despite probably not the smartest play calling to have him be doing that in such a crucial situation. But regardless, just, felt like they were not putting themselves in the best position to maximize that and leaning into what was working. I mean, we saw that, I think, really for the first time in the Kansas City game in 2020 when we were running maybe 6-7 yards a carry. And then for some reason we're passing the ball nonstop. And it seems like we've continued to do that for the better part of, 2.5 seasons here now, where we'll be having success and then we'll get in our heads and we'll try and, do the thing where you want to run a balanced offense. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And would really just like to see them press more into that, especially if this is going to be a situation where Anthony Brown or Tyler Huntley is the starter for 2, 3, 4 more weeks. If teams are giving you running room, take it. And if they stop it, then adjust. So would really just like to see an offense that is pretty one-dimensional at this point, taking what's given to them when it's there. Going into future weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that kind of comes into the calculus for the play call, like on a 3rd and 7, is it feels more necessary to get all 7 on a 3rd and 7 now because I think they still went for it on 4th down a few times in this game, obviously, including the one in their own territory, even though that was inches. But I think that they're less likely to go for like a 4th. They're less likely to say it's 3rd and 7, let's run twice. And even if we only get 3 or 4 on the first try, let's run a second time on 4th and 3. I just think they're less likely to do that because Huntley and Brown are just not the burners that Lamar is in terms of like auto 3 yards almost every time. So I think that's also some of the calculus. And Roman is just anti-running into stacked boxes, which is like kind of better because he used to love running into stacked boxes. So I think the 3rd down play call was just tough. Like on 3rd and 7, I'm just like, it's Anthony Brown on 3rd and 7. Like, I don't know what you do here. He made a couple good throws. So I agree that the situational coaching is like the number one thing for this team, though. Situational play calling and execution is what determines this team. Because
on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. Because when they're just 3rd quarter, the Steelers have the ball, they have the ball. They're just doing they're in their zone, they're operating. But then it comes down to the end of the game, and again, there's a lot of pieces moving, different guys in and out of the lineup each week, and it's hard to put a finger on exactly what it is. It doesn't feel like they're ever panicking. It just feels like they're just almost like they're on the back foot the whole time. They're really playing more prevent style defense. On offense, they're playing a lot. I think it's a lot of conservative. It's a lot of conservative play call and playing. And almost like zone technique, more conservative zone technique and things like that. So nothing I'm too worried about, but just kind of the things you're going to have to watch. We can't do that against Hill and Waddle and Kelsey, the guys who can just destroy you after the catch. So I think that's, McDonald's still growing into it. Roman is whatever we're going to get at this point. And you keep moving. Like you said, a one-dimensional team, just running the ball is the way to move forward. Welcome to the Flock Award. I want to take a moment to shout out Eric DeCosta for building this defense. Man, I mean, this is without Kyle Fuller. This is without Michael Pierce, right? This is no Ojabo debut yet. This is a really impressive defense, and that's because they invested in it. They put so much on this side of the ball, paying Marlowe, paying Marcus Williams, drafting Hamilton, Travis Jones. Like I said, we haven't seen Ojabo yet, but that's, we haven't even seen Ojabo yet. They did a good job making sure Houston came back, getting JPP. It's deep now. It feels like there's just depth and hunger at every position. There's like Pro Bowl caliber players at pretty much every position. The only places they're not is slot corner and D tackle. And that's where the 2 big injuries were. So I think that was incredible. Roquan, you can talk about welcome to the flock for, Marcus Williams this game, Roquan Smith. But I think the big point I have is just look at what EDC built, the defense he built. Kind of a lot of the prices, a lot of the deals he made were kind of ahead of the market too, in terms of seeing prices go up on cornerbacks and safeties. And so, there's no doubt in my mind they pay Roquan Smith. Even if it's top of the market money, they're going to pay the man. So,
at this point, yeah, there's no way they don't. We've been looking for years since CJ Mosley left for that, like, sort of heart of the defense. And it's so crazy how a guy has been here for a month, coming in the middle of the season, not even having, that time in camp where guys really sort of bond and come together. This guy's just coming in here in the middle of the season and seeing the way that, like, guys are, like, really rallying around him too. It feels like he's been here all year. And he's sort of become that rock for the group. So it's so funny how quickly this thing turned into, he'll be a nice rental, hopefully for the playoff push, to like, nah, you're here for 10 years, dude. Sorry, you're not walking out this door.
Yeah, well, and with JPP, like, we talk about sometimes, the social media era of players. There was that tweet that was talking about how the rivalry's dead because Marlowe's 100 people versus one gorilla, like, they don't have the intensity anymore. And one, I don't think that's true at all. But two, I actually think there's also kind of a flip side to players being on social media and them growing up in a way that's more relatable to, people my age, people our age who are just younger and, the internet, like they know JPP, like JPP's like a living legend. Campbell, Houston, to these guys, they're like, I watched these guys when I was in middle school and college or high school and college, man. Like that's kind of the cool thing you see about, I mean, even there was that clip of Patrick Queen talking about Roquan Smith, 18, 20 tackle game, like the week or two before he was traded to Baltimore, and Queen, like just in awe of that connectedness and that kind of being familiar with each other and being like, yeah, I used to watch YouTube highlight clips of Jason Pierre-Paul and Justin Houston wrecking guys as I was trying to become a better edge rusher. That stuff is just cool for both sides, for the older players and the younger ones. And so JPP, I think, just completely bought in. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, something about with Roquan Smith that was particularly impressive, and part of why I think it's such a no-brainer he's going to stay, is the fact that he's not just a guy who you can tell is making everyone around him better. He's actually making plays. He's getting sacks. He's getting turnovers, forcing interceptions, and he's tremendous in coverage. He actually individually pops in a way that I think a lot of these linebackers who get paid often don't. I mean, they're one of those guys who it feels like they're cogging the defense, but they're not really the ones who are
You're only noticed when you mess up, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not to say that there's not something valuable to be had there. But when you're talking about top of the linebacker market money, and you're talking about $20 million and things like that, you also need to be one who's like tangibly making those game-changing plays. You need to be a game-changing player, not just another really good system fit, which there are, just dozens of across the NFL. And those are valuable players, but they're not $20 million plus players. But just week after week, especially this week, I mean, Smith's been one of those guys who's actually being that game-wrecking force. Like what we thought of with Mosley, and especially with Ray Lewis, obviously, that the team's been missing for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's hard, again, the Lamar contract, the Roquan contract, what are they going to do? I think what's very clear is Roquan's not going anywhere. I can't imagine, like they had a huge, crazy high grade on him when he came out of Georgia, and you just like they finally get their hands on a player they've coveted for so long. He's not going anywhere.
You can get rid of just really quick. I was just going to say you can gas that Marcus Peters contract and the Nick Boyle contract, and you have his money next year. So
yeah, and I mean the Ravens are going to have plenty of money to play with, I think. Regardless of how the Lamar thing shakes out and Roquan, they're going to have a lot of money to play with anyway. Breakout of the week. I mean, we've talked about them a little bit, but shout out the 2020 draft class. Kind of, tough draft class to get integrated in the NFL. Queen, again, we talked about this. Queen coming in during COVID to be an inside linebacker in Baltimore. High standards, high pressure environment, AFC North football. There was a lot going against him, and it definitely showed in his first 2 years with the roller coaster, with a lot. I mean, especially last year, it was a huge roller coaster, very, very bumpy ride from Patrick Queen. And this year, instead of this, it's just this. He's just steadily improved game over game. Roquan gets here, and now he's playing like a Pro Bowler because he's got an All-Pro next to him. And like Kobe Shaq level defense from them yesterday. It felt like they were playing together from one mind, like Smith finishing up Queen's sack, them overlapping in coverage, them being right near each other and seeing the same things on those interceptions. That was really impressive. And Ron already talked about JK. What other, do you feel like there were any other players who broke out this week? I know this has kind of gotten a little tough as the year's gone on with, Bateman going out and things like that. Didn't feel like Likely was a big part of things, but how'd you guys feel about any breakouts this week?
You want to tee it up first, Michael?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the one that maybe comes to mind, I don't know if it's even quite a breakout at this stage of the season, but I think DeMarcus Robinson's done a really good job of reminding us, his value as that, maybe not a true number one receiver or anything like that. Not saying he should be, the number one guy going into next season or anything of that sort. But he's just really proven to be a very valuable piece of this offense throughout the year, and especially yesterday. I mean, he was our leading receiver, 5 catches for 53 yards. They're not winning that game if he doesn't make those plays. And it's hard to imagine for as rough as this offense has been in the passing game, it's hard to imagine where they'd be without DeMarcus Robinson at this point. If it was James Prochet out there in that role, Tylan Wallace out there in that role, Benjamin Victor, as much as I love the guy, out there in that role, it's night and day. And when that's the case, that's when you have a difference maker on your hands. And again, not saying he's Justin Jefferson out there or anything like that, but difference maker in the sense of relative to your alternatives. And so just, I guess to me, not quite a breakout per se, but definitely just solidifying the value he's brought to this team and reminding us of what a good signing he was.
I can't wait to go back and edit this clip to have you say that DeMarcus Robinson is better than Justin Jefferson.
Oh, obviously. Yeah.
True X receiver, though. Like, in a way, it was like a thing that was talked about as like a, prototypical receiver for the Ravens to look for. He's not huge. He's not that big contested catch guy, the red zone guy, but in terms of a kind of X receiver who's got good size, good run blocking instincts, but just like a really good instincts in general, knows where to sit down in zones, is good at separating it, like good at separating on those man coverage against man coverage on those timing sideline routes. And clearly has a good rapport with every quarterback on the roster. So I agree. I think he's been fantastic. Ron?
Buddy, we'll just be glad to have receivers out there who belong on an NFL field at this point. So honestly, we'll take that. Again, this one, I don't know if you'd really call it a breakout either, but it was more just like, all right, finally, dude, you showed something. Ben Cleveland. He was asked to kind of rotate in there yesterday in that right guard spot and really kind of held it down. I mean, there was that play where the ball hit off him early that led to the fumble. I don't really know if I'd say that was his fault. It was just kind of a weird play to begin with, so I'm not going to really hold him too accountable for that. But, we weren't calling his name. He wasn't getting beat all day. He just kind of held down the fort, which with Kevin Zeitler out there being such a key part, you can't ask somebody to come in and try to replicate that role. All you can really do is ask somebody to come in and not blow the game. And to his point, he didn't. And maybe he earned himself some more rotational snaps at the left guard spot going forward, or who knows. But either way, it's nice to know that he showed enough to where if he has to come in the game again going forward, it's not like,
Yeah, I mean, especially in that platoon type role where you're not able to just stay on the field. I think he allowed one sack, but otherwise was just really clean. And I actually think, come to think of it, it was him at the bottom of that pile for the fumble recovery.
Right, you're right. It wasn't Linderbaum.
And I mean, it was good to see it from him. And hey, while we're talking about O-line breakouts, let's shout out Tristan Colon-Castillo. I mean, first start, or not a start, he started last year, but for Bozeman, Bozeman was sick. But first started offensive guard.
Tigers.
Really just kind of thought he was the backup center, really, so that Makari didn't have to be the backup center and he could firmly back up the tackle positions. But they really, really put a lot of trust into him, and he came up huge. I mean, I can't imagine how good that must have felt for him after the game to have gotten the call and played as well as he did, but had a fantastic game. Really no bad plays. He just really held it down, executed his assignment. So I think he deserves a shout out in this category too. Moving on to go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say some love for the right guards.
Oh yeah. Dude, well, and that's the thing. Like Zeitler goes down, you're like, oh my God, the run game. Like we need Zeitler. And they came up with it. I mean, huge shout out to the coaching staff too, to Dallas Andres. I mean, that's tough to rotate in for a Pro Bowler who's been playing at that level so far this year. But moving on to head scratcher of the week. I want to get this out of the way quickly. I was home cooking. Like there were just a lot of, I felt like bad penalty calls. Like the DPIs on Marlowe were really ticky tacky. That weird OPI DPI cancel out.
The roughing the passer on Madubuike.
Yeah, that was horrific. Just a lot of home cooking involved there. Nothing that was, I think, too game determining. So that's why I kind of want to just leave it at home cooking and move on from it and talk about my real head scratcher, which is Johnny Harbaugh. And you're just keep the challenge flag in your pocket. Just don't do it. Just don't. You lose your challenges. You challenge the wrong things. Like if you're going to go for it on fourth down anyway, just don't use the challenge. Just go for it on fourth down. Right? It just doesn't make sense. You're just giving up a timeout, especially on a play like that where like he very obviously did not make the line to gain. It was just a bad challenge, and he does that a lot. And the other thing Johnny Harbaugh did that he always does, which is getting cute with those kickoffs, and they broke off. Same thing happens every single week, and I get it's because we have Justin Tucker, and Justin Tucker can kick a field goal, can kick a football 20,000 different ways, every single way known to mankind. But really on kickoffs, the cute kickoffs, every game, maybe the first one works, maybe the second one works, and the third one gets returned for 40 yards, and then Tucker boots it out of the end zone every time. Let's just stop getting cute with things. Let's stop getting cute with these challenges. Just these kind of things have got to sharpen up for the playoffs, because I think that's where the margins get so much tighter. And those kind of little baby things where you're missing a timeout at the end of the half, or the other team starts at the 40 instead of the 25, make a bigger difference. So that was kind of what had me going. What about you guys?
That was pretty much it. Like, in terms of the only other one that I can really think of was having Anthony Brown throw on his first play from the Steelers' 1 yard line, or their own 1 yard line, excuse me. But
yeah, I had that as a head scratcher, not because I like
everyone was, and it kind of goes back to the debate we were saying before. It's like, yeah, everybody knew the run was coming, but we were still gouging him for 8 yards a carry. Things get a lot tighter when you're that far down in your own like territory. So I feel like there was a decent chance that thing might have gotten blown up had they handed it off. So that's why I don't really like. It's more of a ballsy call of the week as opposed to a head scratcher of the week.
And so the way I felt about it was, one, giving Brown some confidence, like just coming into the game being like, hey, you're a quarterback. You're gonna throw the ball.
It wasn't anything crazy.
It was back across his body on the 1 yard line, though, and you're asking for a pick six there if he throws that just a little bit to the right. And that was maybe my biggest concern there, was just like, it was less about throw versus run late in the game and more about guy who's making his NFL debut against the Steelers in Pittsburgh on his 1 yard line with a designed throw across his body, which is like number one thing you tell quarterbacks not to do, is throw back across their body. And like big brain in the vault, Greg Roman is like, they're never going to see it coming because this would be the stupidest possible thing. It's so dumb, it'll just might work. Like and for a 3 yard gain, like if he went for 99 yards, no one here is yelling at him. Like, good for you for tricking everyone like that. But for 3 yards, give the ball to Pat Ricard, let him get to the 3 and try again. Like that, to me,
I hated. Like, I did not like. I would have maybe called a timeout then, because I don't think I would have run the ball against the way the Steelers were lined up. In just like everyone was mugged up on the line. They had everyone but single man coverage on the outside. Like it was the kind of box you don't want to run into from the 1 yard line either, because one foot from one lineman slips and that's a safety. So because they were on like the 1 yard line as backed up as you could be. So yeah, I mean it was ballsy. You're right, but I also think that I mean,
even if he threw it the other way to the right sideline, this is a different conversation to me. But throwing it back and cross your body, very clearly that was his first read too. Like he immediately pivoted to that side. That's the part that to me just made it so frustrating, was that it's just like every single box you could check for this is a bad idea. It was like Roman was like, this is why we're calling it. They'll never see it coming. It was almost like running a fumble-rooski on the one. Like they'll never see it coming. So to me, that was maybe the part that was most frustrating, was just that it was going to the left sideline.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention, actually, it's kind of funny come to think of it. Like, I think there probably is there's one play call every week from Greg Roman that either is going to go really well, like that either is going to work and we're going to be like, oh man, that was ballsy, way to go, or it's just going to
Crochet is going to throw it to triple coverage.
Well, and
quadruple coverage.
Sorry, excuse me.
We got the other side of it this week. Like it was a ballsy call, but I would say a relatively safer play, but a ballsy call. And I am pro Greg Roman trying to save his job. Like, I just think he coached like better, because he knew this comes down to me coaching the offense this week, and I have to try. I mean, if
he thinks that's going to save his job, that's fine.
But let him think, just let him think it. I'm sure that like the feeling in his head is, hey, if I steal this offense to, a great rest of the season, whatever, I can hang on. And, I think that feeling is I'm going to have to get a little bit more ballsy in a safer way. Like, again, ballsier call, ballsier decision, safer play call. And I think that I'm more okay with that on the Greg Roman spectrum, rather than like I guess, ballsy call and like unsafe, like ballsy decision, unsafe call. Or
where I'll give him credit was that instead of putting Pat Ricard in motion on every snap, he put Devin Duvernay in motion on every snap, which makes a lot more sense.
More threatening.
It's something that probably should have been happening this whole time. It's not something that should be worth complimenting because it's so obvious. But nonetheless, we're just trying to get from the negative numbers up to at least 0. And I feel like he's at least got himself back up to not in the negatives with who he's putting in motion there. So props to him for that.
I'm just cracking up sitting here thinking about Greg Roman on like Tuesday getting that notification on his phone that Stanford wasn't taking him. And he's like, shit, I got to coach now.
I got to get it together. Hey, he and again, hey, well, remember at the beginning of the year when the run blocking wasn't as great and Greg Roman said something about like small tweaks were almost there and everyone was giving him a hard time, and then he fixed it, and then the O-line regressed a little bit last week, and then he fixed it again. I mean, I'm not trying to say keep Greg Roman, what is it? Don't hear what I'm not saying. That's Ron's favorite saying. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying keep Greg Roman. What I am saying is maybe we can lay off him for like a week or two and just, let the man live. He did a good job a couple weeks. He did a good job a couple weeks in a row to get the job done. And I think that as low as expectations are for him, we should be happy with that. Let's move on to comeback player of the week quickly, just because these players coming back, Dobbins and Williams, Stanley, and Gus Edwards, won us this game. And it just tells you this team can stand with almost anyone if those key players, if you're Stanley, you're Dobbins, those key players are healthy. And, this team is supposed to still get stronger. I don't want to get into the whole Ojabo Kolar thing because I don't really question what's happening there. They're rookies who did not get full preseason, and you're just not going to throw them into the mix until you're certain they're ready, because you're trying to compete as a playoff team right now. So I've no issues with that, but I am hoping they come and at least are able to play and we're able to see something from them this season. Maybe Ojabo, I'm thinking maybe he's a guy that's able to be completely fresh and unleash him a little bit in the playoffs. But, I just think it's worth noting that these guys are just, they're gritty. They're pushing through every obstacle that's getting thrown at them and their teammates. And I think the whole team deserves a ton of credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the Ojabo point, not only like waiting until they're ready, but kind of waiting until you have to. I mean, they know that eventually, JPP and Justin Houston, they're older guys. Eventually they're going to need, whether it's, next week, which it's not looking that way, or it's in the divisional round, they're going to need a spell at some point. So if you can hold off Ojabo until you absolutely need him and he's 100% whenever that is, of course, maybe you want to see him get some snaps at the NFL level and kind of get the feel for the game, because he didn't even get anything in the preseason. When he's out there, it's going to be his first time ever on an NFL field. So maybe you want him to have a little bit of experience before that, but I like the idea of having him out there as fresh as possible. And with the way that these guys are playing right now in the front, there's no dire reason to bring him back.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as those comeback players, you're absolutely right. There's the phrase that emerged in social media news over the last 4 years, big if true. It feels like the Ravens are big if healthy. It's that is the label for the Ravens, big if healthy, because the if is pretty big too, right? I mean, we've seen over the last few years that is not even kind of a given. The injury report was is a Christmas list this week, right? With everyone who is maybe going to play, maybe not going to play, who knows? And it feels like it's probably going to be that way the rest of the season too, just with so many guys who are banged up and probably going to be coming in and out of the lineup every given week. Man, what a difference makers. I mean, Ronnie Stanley looked like Trent Williams out there on those pulls for the left tackle spot last week. I saw him way on the other side of the field, and I was initially kind of concerned because I felt like we hadn't really seen a whole lot of him pulling like that in previous seasons. And every other play, it felt like he was over there on the right side. So good for him that he was that mobile, especially coming off a week where maybe he wasn't practicing that much, and not sure how much of that was precautionary versus actual injury stuff that he's dealing with. But man, that was just great to see. And Ron, to your point earlier, J.K. Dobbins probably wasn't running at full speed. He looked kind of like, a guy on 99 overall Madden, but if he was also looking for the bathroom, like he just kind of was doing the little waddle the whole way. But man, if he can do that at 70%, like it is fun to think about if he can get healthy here by season's end as we head to the playoffs. Because man, the run game just looks so different with him. A lot of the holes that we saw emerge really were not that big. They were holes that if Kenyon Drake or Mike Davis, who momentary sidebar, props to him for shouting out the guys for the win yesterday after getting waived. That was cool to see. But they wouldn't be hitting those holes, right? I mean, there's a reason that when Drake was out there and Davis was out there, and the run game just looked different. Even though, I mean, you watch some of the tape, the holes were a lot of the times just about as big. But having that vision, having that ability to get skinny like Dobbins does, and hit the hole like he does, just makes such a difference, especially against stacked boxes. There's a reason that they were able to run against such a good run defense like that so consistently, and that was being able to find those little spots that only come with vision like Dobbins has. I mean, that was just such a game changer, and if they can get that going forward, you actually feel a lot better about your chances to sneak out a win against Atlanta, who is sneaky decent this year, a win against maybe another one against Pittsburgh if they can sweep them coming at home, maybe winning against the Browns this week. So it makes you feel a lot better if he can actually continue to do that and not end up back on the injury report this week after a pretty relatively heavy workload.
Yeah, I also really loved the Ravens. I mean, it's not like a revolutionary tactic, but the Ravens not activating them all week and activate them on Saturday to keep things in suspense to the very end and not let the Steelers game plan as perfectly as maybe they could have and be more ready for the Edwards Drake attack and Hill attack that the Ravens have unleashed over the last few weeks without Dobbins. There was a feeling Dobbins would be back for the game. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like a huge secret, but officially confirming it so late, get every little advantage you can get is one thing this team tries to do. We spent a lot of time talking about the stars of this game because they popped off at the top end of the stat sheet and the highlights, but let's talk about some unsung heroes. And again, I think there are enough in this game to go around. So let's just go around, each pick one and go with it. Mike, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, we'll kind of combine the quarterback play here because on the one hand, it's Tyler Huntley's he actually looked pretty good out there before he got hurt. And let's, make sure that it's not forgotten what he did before he got hurt there. With his legs, he was throwing the ball, making pretty quick decisions. He did miss Mark Andrews pretty wide open in the end zone on one drive, but one of the reasons for that was he was very decisive. He was finding guys who were open and he was firing the ball pretty quickly. And that's what you're looking for from a backup quarterback is, finding that first read, getting it out there if he's open. And when he wasn't, I mean, he was making just really good decisions with running the ball too. He wasn't running into, 3 or 4 guys sitting there 2-3 yards deep. He was consistently bouncing out and making up for a lot of, you talked about Morgan Moses earlier, but he was definitely getting beat off the edge early a lot. And Huntley just made up for a lot of that bouncing out to the right. It felt like every other play, it felt like I was playing Madden. I mean, the Madden 23 offensive lines are pretty awful. I don't know if you guys have played the newest one yet, but the offensive lines are just disgusting. And so it feels like every time I'm playing with the Ravens, I'm snapping it and running with Lamar straight to the right sideline every single time. And it felt like I was watching myself there with Huntley there for a little while. But props to him for not only, keeping us in the game at like 0-0 game manager, not turning the ball over, but he got us on the board twice early on there. And that just made such a difference when you're thinking about trying to get points early in a game where you were not expecting to score a lot. And then Anthony Brown, we talked about earlier, just making maybe some not so great decisions from Greg Roman, throwing the ball as much as he did. But he was 3 for 5 on that drive. He didn't turn the ball over. And he looked relatively comfortable out there. And maybe the biggest non-play he made was actually taking that sack at around the 20-yard line. Because how many times have we seen Lamar force something and he gets intercepted? I'm sure you're going to edit it, but it's not me saying Anthony Brown is better than Lamar Jackson by any means. But when you talk about what you're looking for, especially from a third string quarterback, it's, man, just don't screw this up. And he did, mission accomplished. He did not turn the ball over. So really impressive there.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. He was in the ultimate, just don't F this up spot, and he did it. That's
props to him.
That's all you can ask for.
Mine,
mine is sort of a tandem of Broderick Washington and Travis Jones. We've given Broderick Washington his praises this year on the show pretty well, but Travis Jones is a guy that we really haven't had the chance to talk about much, just because he hasn't really stood out. But I mean, yesterday, Pittsburgh 65 yards on the ground. Najee Harris only 33, 2.8 yards a carry. Really did nothing outside of that touchdown that almost got punched out, by the way. I don't know if people, that was anyway. They both of them really kind of provided just sort of a stable presence there on the inside. Neither of them were jumping off the screen by any means, but Pittsburgh had really one chance of like dominating, not dominating, but taking that game yesterday. And it was going to be by running the ball and eating up the time of possession and making the Ravens have to put points on the board when they got the ball. And the defense didn't allow them an inch in that regard. And I think Washington and Jones both kind of deserve some praise for their play yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are two of the guys I was going to go with. Just gumming up the works on the interior, and they didn't really stuff the stat sheet. It felt like, I'm kind of curious now. I don't think they had like that many tackles individually, but they were. I mean, it's something James Ogden's talked about on Rush Street Report as well. The tackle assist, right? The gumming up the works, making clear lanes for the linebackers. To kind of flow in with Queen and Smith, and they're again complementary football, not just offense and defense, special teams, but within the defense. It just looks really, really good out there. I'm excited to go through the game tape this week. My unsung hero is the guy who gets the most undeserving criticism on this team, I think, and that's Patrick Ricard. Dude played how many snaps did he play? Now I'm curious. He played 45 snaps. The only players to play more than him were the offensive lineman and Mark Andrews. And he absolutely demolished on every single one of them. It's just not, and we talked about this with Linderbaum as well. It's not just his strength blocking, it's his technique. It's his ability to seal off holes and seal off blocks. I mean, he was dominating TJ Watt for whenever he was lined up against him. And say what you will about Watt being injured, but that is still a very good football player that Ricard was just nullifying all game. And so Ricard, I mean, I think Ricard had one of the best games I've seen him play ever. I mean, it just looked like every single assignment, every single block he made, every single gap he opened up, and like he was planting guys in the turf. He was putting guys on the ground, pancake Pat, like he likes to be called. And so definitely huge props to him. The Ravens re-signing him continues to look like a smart move with the way the offense went this year, because it's just such a safety valve to have virtually a sixth offensive lineman who doesn't have to check in every play, but a sixth offensive lineman who blocks as well as an offensive lineman does, as you would if you just threw an offensive lineman in the same spot, can just execute so many different types of blocks. And I mean, his brain, knowing this offense and knowing where the running lanes are, knowing what the ball carrier's like. It's all these little things that I think he's just mastered over the course of this year and has quietly just been incredible.
And he could be the number one wide receiver when you ask him to.
Yeah. Hey, he was that wheel route, man. If he had caught that, we'd never have heard the end of it on this pod. I mean, I would have gone on for days and days, but I just love seeing a 311-pound fullback just demolish unsuspecting, or I guess suspecting and unable to do anything about it, linebackers and defensive line. I mean, he's bulldozing defensive linemen sometimes because he's just so, they do such a good job of their combo blocks, setting up a defender with a combo block with like Linderbaum engaging off the snap and then Ricard just coming in and blowing him up from the side. It's just, again, well coached, well schemed, well executed blocking. It's beautiful. Looking ahead, we've got the Browns next week. It is going to be a tough game. It's in Cleveland. It's still an aggressive Cleveland D line. I think the rest of their defense is porous enough, but I think their passing or their rush defense has just been awful this year. And so I think that presents a good matchup for the Ravens. I think there's a feeling in Baltimore, the Ravens defense wants to kind of let everyone know that Deshaun Watson is in fact not all that. And that really the Browns aren't all that.
Well, he's all some things, but definitely not all that.
He's all, yeah. I'm cautiously weirdly optimistic about this game because of how well the run game matches up against a really, really bad Cleveland run defense. And the way this defense is playing. Marlowe is not going to let that happen twice in a row, I don't think. And so you kind of expect a good game out of him. And the front seven keeps playing the way it's playing. If you're able to get out to any kind of a lead, you can really establish dominance in this game, I think, and force the Browns to go away from what should be their strength, which is running the ball, which hasn't always been a strength against this Ravens front. So I weirdly like this matchup after this Steelers game more than I did on Friday.
You want to take a stab at it first, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing to note, I mean, Watson definitely looked a little better last week than he did a couple weeks ago. 276 yards and a touchdown. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a pretty nice day against Cincinnati. So that's definitely something to watch. If Marlowe can bounce back and keep DPJ under wraps, you feel a lot better about this. But yeah, I mean, we'd love to see them come out with that energy and remind everyone who, not just who Watson is off the field, but it would also be not so bad for the Ravens if the guy who got paid all that guaranteed money on the Ravens home field starts to look pretty not so great. Making the case to Lamar Jackson that, hey, this isn't such a good thing when teams pay this. Will that make a difference? I have no idea, but it never hurts. So would love to see that as well. But yeah, if we can run the ball like we did this last week, man, you start to feel a heck of a lot better, especially if Huntley's healthy, which it sounds like Harbaugh suggested he probably is going to be good to go.
I think
if Brown's out there, hard to say what to expect. But if Huntley's out there, you feel relatively good about his ability to manage that game and walk out of at least a low-scoring affair with a victory.
If Brown goes into Cleveland and beats Cleveland, I'm buying an Anthony Brown jersey. You heard like that.
Brown versus the Browns. Let's
12,
go.
12 is already a lucky number for me and my family, so I have no problem getting a 12 Ravens jersey. But if it's up to him and he goes into Cleveland and comes out with that win, I mean, he's already earned that, that Ravens Hall of Clutch backups. He's already earned his entrance into there. They've had Mallett and even Huntley counts in there. Dilfer was a backup, but if he pulls this, if he's called on, he pulls this off, man. It's worship Anthony Brown in Baltimore season because that's not keeping a season alive. The season would stay alive, but keeping like the advantage, allowing the Ravens to keep the advantage in the North while Jackson is out is just unbelievable. So
also, I said that they're coming into Baltimore. You're absolutely right. They're going into Cleveland this week, which would make it all the bigger to get a road win.
Yeah.
I this is probably the game more than any other this year that I'm not really going in with like a like sort of an analytical sort of mind towards it. Like I just want them to beat this team so bad this week, and I want them to put that piece of garbage into the turf 18 times. Like, oh my God. I won't go on the huge rant here because I could, and I'd probably get our video struck or something. But just, oh my God, what an undesirable team and a piece of garbage quarterback and a fan base who wants to embolden that and get behind them. Not in every case. I know there's plenty of Browns fans out there who don't like what they did bringing in Watson and aren't just playing this. Oh, well, he wasn't found guilty in a court of law, so that means he didn't do it, even though there's no way that they could get proof that he did anything because it was in a private massage parlor, yada, yada, continue. The point I'm trying to make is just gross franchise, half of a gross fan base, gross quarterback, yuck, 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 gross colors. Get their asses out of here.
It's a chance to see a really, really good defense stuff him into the ground several times. I'm with you, and I think that, I don't know how much it's hard to tell how much really players cared about that, but I do think there is just a sense of like he's on the Browns now, just hating the Browns and him getting an extension of that. Little forecast here from Tony Lombardi for the Ravens game. It looks like it's going to be snowing. Could have a snow game in Cleveland. I think that would be a blast, and I think I really think that actually would give us a little bit more of an advantage. Again, making it harder to move the ball through the air. And if everyone's grounded, I think the Ravens can pull it off. So, yeah. So I think that's about it. I mean, that was a heck of a game, and I think the Ravens are just so well positioned moving forward. A lot of the predictors, the different models have them at 99% chance to make the playoffs after that win, and better than 2/3 chance of winning the division. And again, with everything that's happened for the Ravens, not just this year, but really in the last 2 years, last 18 months. you can't be upset with where they are right now. And even in a tough AFC, it's really just a matter of get to the playoffs with Lamar and this defense, and I really think anything can happen.
Yeah, right there with you.
All right, gents. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for watching as always, and everyone who's watching this after the live broadcast. And if you do get a chance, make sure to like and subscribe to the Rush Street Report YouTube channel. We'd love to have you back.